Consider the following. Here we have 3 different chords, 4 chords total, but the first and the last one are the same, right? 3 different chords in the key of C major. Okay, we have one that's with the root on C, we have one with the root on G, and one with the root on F, and then another one with the root on C. Okay, so these are all in C major. So we could calculate this, right? We could figure out if this was a major or a minor chord, and if this was a major or a minor chord. In fact, let's do it. So how we would do it is we would count up the scale from the root of this chord to the root of that chord. So let's do it. C, the next note would be D, the next note would be E, so that'd be the 3rd note, the 4th note would be F, and then the 5th note would be G. So that is a chord built on the 5th scale degree. Next, to figure out if that's a major or minor chord, we would apply our pattern of the diatonic chord progression. So remember, it goes major, minor, minor, major, major. The 5th one is major. And this is built on the 5th scale degree, so this must be a major chord. Okay? Let's do it for this one. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to figure out what note of the scale the root of this chord is. It's an F, so we're going to count up. We're in the key of C, so we're going to count up from C to F. So C, D, E, F. It is the 4th scale degree. So this is a chord built on the 4th scale degree. So now we're going to apply our pattern of the diatonic chord progression pattern, and that goes major, minor, minor, major is the 4th one. So the 4th one is major, so this must also be a major chord. So I have a bunch of major chords here. I have a C major chord, a G major chord, an F major chord, and another C major chord. Cool. Now, what I want to talk about here is inversions. Now that we know that these are major or minor, let's just hear this, and then I'm going to show you how to make it sound a little cooler. So here it is. Okay? Now these chords are all in what we call root position, meaning the root note is at the bottom. That's root position. They don't have to be in root position though. You see that when we have a series of chords that are in root position and they're all stacked perfectly in their thirds and they look like perfect chords, which is great, they can sound a little jumpy. Like listen between these first 2. It sounds like the chord goes from here and then it jumps up high and then it falls down and then it falls down. So it would be nicer if there was a little bit more elegant motion in between the chords. It would sound like how music usually sounds because people are usually using inversions. So let me play that for you again and think about the jerkiness of this jumping from here to here and then falling down. Okay, now you might not hear it as jerky because this is just the way you're hearing it for the first time. Let me fix it. Not fix it. Let me change it to use inversions. So we're all these chords are in root position here. I'm going to leave my C major chord in root position, but I'm going to change my G major chord so that it doesn't jump up so high. Now I'm not going to change any notes. All the notes are going to stay the same. I'm just going to change octaves. So I'm going to take this D at the top. I'm going to put it at the bottom. Okay? So it's still G, B, and D. I just put the D at the bottom. Now I'm going to take this B. I'm going to put that underneath the D. There we go. Still the same notes, but now we see this note stays the same, right? And this C and E just kind of falls down. So now so this is now an inversion. And there's fancy names for which inversion we're doing, whether the 5th is at the bottom or the 3rd is at the bottom. In this case, the 3rd is at the bottom. So it has a name. We'll talk more about those later. I just want to get the idea of inversions into your head before we get locked onto like the fancy names for stuff. So this is now inverted. So we don't see the perfect stacking in thirds. Because if we did, this would be G, D, and then there would be an F here. Right now it's stacked in thirds, but that's the wrong chord. This is the chord we actually want. So it doesn't look like it's stacked in thirds, but it is, right? The octaves are just shuffled a little bit to make it sound a little smoother. Let's fix this one now. Let's take this C and move it to the bottom. Okay. So that makes a nice little motion. Let's try moving the A to the bottom also. Okay. Now there's a lot less motion between these three chords. So let's hear them now. Right? Now that might sound a little more like what a pop song sounds like, because the notes are not jumping around so much to stay in root position. When you play on a guitar, you hardly ever play in strict root position. The guitar is kind of designed so that the shapes we use for our chords, they usually have the root at the bottom, but the way we stack the octaves above are kind of different so that notes flow together quite well. So these are called inversions, the way I've changed these so that the root note is not necessarily at the bottom. These are in root position. These two are not. And that the reason we would do that is just because it sounds better. It's still the same chord. We still call this one a G major. We still call this one an F major. So we didn't change any notes. We didn't change the name of the chord or anything. We just shuffled around some octaves so that it sounds a little more interesting. Let's take this A and put it back up at the top. And let's hear how that sounds. It's going to be a tiny bit different. Right, so now it kind of goes up a little bit there and then back down. One of the reasons that kind of shows why we like it is imagine these are singers. Imagine we have three singers, each singer singing one of these notes. So this first singer is always going to sing the top note. So he's going to sing a G, and then he's going to stay on a G, which is nice. He's going to go up to an A, and then he's going to go down to a G, right? So this really nice melody of having the same note and then up and then down, back to the same note. Very simple line. Let's look at the middle singer. She's going to go on an E, down to a D, up to an F, because they're always going to be on the middle note, and then she's going to go down to an E, right? So she's going to start and end on the same note, but go down, up, and then back. Let's look at the third singer is going to go down here, and then down to a B, and then back to a C, and then stay on a C. So a much simpler melody than just jumping around like crazy, which is hard to do with your voice. And because, well, not because it's hard to do with your voice, but it sounds better to not do that. So this is an inversion. Now this makes spotting chords a little trickier because of the change here. But if we wanted to confirm that this was actually a G major chord, what you can do is just start playing with the notes and try to get them to line up in that first third pattern. So if you see one of these in the wild and you're like, I think that's a triad, just start playing with the octaves. There it is. Somehow you're going to be able to get that back into a first, third, fifth pattern if it is in fact a triad. Okay? This will be important when we look at that piece that we were looking at earlier, this one, because we have a couple of those. There's one right there. There's another one right there. So we'll look at that again in just a second. But I have one more thing to point out for you before we do that. So let's move on to our one last thing for this unit, and then we'll re-look at that song.